Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Later on the show, we are going to talk about the business of the arts in Rhode Island and a new grant program that you approved if you went to the voting booth. Well, most of you approved last November, a new bond that's going to provide money to cultural institutions. They're rolling that out. We're going to hear about how that works from the head of the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the business of law, and in particular, intellectual property law, which is a hot topic. And my guests to talk about that today from Adler, Pollock & Sheehan, one of the major law firms in Providence, is Bob Brooks. He's the managing partner, and Dan Holmander. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
I just realized I didn't check my pronunciation. Yes, that doesn't always work for me. So Dan Holmander, he's an attorney, and he's leading that new group. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thanks for inviting us.
You're welcome.
So, Bob, let's get started. Folks at home can't always keep track of the multi-named law firms and which one's which. So can you give folks just a quick sketch of Adler, Pollock & Sheehan, how many attorneys you have, where your offices are?
Adler, Pollock & Sheehan is a 57 attorney law firm that's located in Providence with offices in Boston, Manchester, New Hampshire, and Newport. We're a business-oriented law firm. What I mean by that is we represent businesses. We do corporate law, labor and employment, business litigation, and we also do estates and trusts.
You're not coming with me on the traffic ticket then?
Well, we do some white-collar crime.
Are you accusing me of
No, just in case,
Not yet.
In case you want to refer anybody.
Thank you.
And in your business, you might run into them.
That's more Tim White's world than mine, but yeah.
And we also do some DWI defense as well.
And you're managing partner, and that's CEO effectively for a law firm, right? The titles are different, but you're the head guy there.
Yeah, I'm the day-to-day executive that runs the firm.
And the reason you guys are here today, and the reason Dan is joining us, is Adler, Pollock & Sheehan. You just announced you've created a new 3-person patent, trademark, and copyright protection group. Stick with us. It's important, so don't go away on this. Dan, you're leading that. So in plain English, for folks at home who might not know the ins and outs of this part of the law, what is your group going to be doing there?
Well, I think to start, we should talk about what intellectual property is. For a lot of people who don't know what that term means. Intellectual property is the new currency, as the currency of the new economy. Every business has intellectual property. Intellectual property could be trade secrets, so know-how, customer lists, patents, it could be trademarks, it could be copyrights.
So the logo for Executive Suite is intellectual property.
That is intellectual property. That would be considered a trademark. And so each business that is doing a product or a service would always consider whether or not they want to protect their investment in the name of a product or a service, or in the utilitarian value of an invention, or in the branding that they do. And that's why intellectual property is important. To give you some statistics, in 1994 there were 200,000 patents filed in the United States. In 2004 there were 400,000, this is annually now, and this past year was 600,000. So you can see an exponential growth. And in particular, Rhode Island, we've seen a huge uptick. Over the last 6 years, we've seen a 50% growth in the number of patents granted in the state of Rhode Island.
That's interesting. Now, is that are people inventing more things, or are they just patenting them more often?
No, I think it goes to the fact that we're attracting a lot of new young entrepreneurs in this state. We have a lot of new businesses, and we have a lot of businesses that are starting to expand. So this was what really is why we formed this group together, to say, let's service that group that's already here in Rhode Island.
And so who will you be representing as you get your clients going with this, and what sort of cases would they be bringing?
So we represent anybody who's doing a research products or services. So you think about a classic thing like a research hospital, universities. You could be looking at a company that makes a product. Think of like a Hasbro. Or a service company. All those companies are doing intellectual property. Some of them are doing what we call soft IP, which is more copyrights and trademarks, and some of them are doing more hard IP, which is patents. But all of them have a patent strategy or a intellectual property strategy to a certain degree, and that's why we've decided.
Now, is your job to help them figure out what to patent, to help them get the patent, or to fight someone trying to infringe on their patent?
Yeah, so there's a different, right, so that's a good point. We're patent prosecutors. A patent prosecutor is a person who will draft and file a patent application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. A patent litigator typically is someone who will go to court and enforce those rights that we create. So Adler, Pollock & Sheehan already had a group of patent litigators, and it was synergistic to say, well, if they're going to enforce patents, maybe we should be there to help create them.
So do you have to like draw the diagrams you see on a patent? You know, when when everyone's scrutinizing what the next iPhone will have, you'll see the patent app appear and there's some weird drawing of a new keyboard or something. Is that you?
In years past, they actually, a lot of patent attorneys were actually draftsmen themselves, but today it's become a specialty niche in of itself. So we tend to use a draftsman to help us. But yeah, we do initial sketching.
So the people who went to RISD and the law school, they're able to get a job with you doing that. That's interesting.
That's right.
So Bob, this intellectual property, IP for short, as Dan mentioned, you already were doing that at Adler, Pollock & Sheehan, and it's clearly been a growth area. You wouldn't have brought on these 3 new attorneys if you didn't see that. What were you seeing that made you say this is a good area for the firm to specialize in?
There were a few things. As Dan said, we were doing the prosecutions. We were actually doing the defense of things, but we saw that there was a need, new businesses coming into the state, the economy starting to turn around in Rhode Island, and businesses, we were getting more and more calls with companies that wanted to either provide a patent for something that they've invented or created. And so we looked at our business plan and said, you know, where are the holes? Where are the services that we can provide to businesses that we're not providing now? And so we looked at intellectual property. We got to Dan and the others from his group that we've added, and we just felt as though it would be a good thing to add to the list of things that we do for our clients.
Dan, I'm curious, you know, there's some controversy actually around patents these days. There are some folks I've read, analysts of the economy, who say we're doing too much on copyright protection, IP patenting, and that it could be slowing the gears of the economy. I mean, obviously you have an interest in at least some of it continuing, but what do you think of that debate? Are there areas you think it could go too far?
Well, I mean, I have to say I'm a little bit biased, but I'll say that, I mean, we've had the patent system around since 1787, and I think that has something to do with the success of the U.S. economy over the last, few hundred years, 200 years. I think that right now what they're really talking about is saying there's a thing called patent troll. So people who get a patent, they don't actually make a product or sell a service, and they're essentially using the court system in order to extract monies from companies, or legitimate companies are actually doing work. And there's legislation now pending in Congress trying to curtail some of that. I actually come down on the fact that we have to be very careful about not tampering down on innovation, because it does still inspire what we call a garage inventor or an inventor. Patents might be the only thing that he has. So if we're going to put some sort of curtailing on the enforceability of those patents, we have to be very careful about how it affects that system. So there are some things that they're talking about in terms of proving your claims when you go to court a little bit more in advance. But when they start talking about some of the other more restricted things, I'm a little bit on the fence about that.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the business of law and what these guys know about what's going on in the Rhode Island economy and the New England economy more generally. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about the business of the arts with Randy Rosenbaum from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. They have some new money to give out, so if you know a local cultural organization, you won't want to miss that. But right now, we're talking about 2 leading lawyers in Providence from Adler, Pollock & Sheehan, one of the major firms in Providence. Bob Brooks, he's managing partner, and Dan Holmander, he's an attorney there working on their IP practice, their new patent, trademark, and copyright protection group, which we were just talking about. Bob, I want to turn to the broader question of the business of legal services. We had a lot of major law firms in Providence over the years. We've had some mergers and shrinkage and this and that going on, but where is the business of legal services right now? What are you seeing in terms of demand, in terms of client behavior?
I think the market is good and it's getting better. If I could describe our legal market, say, as compared to Boston, the Boston legal market has been going good and going well for a little longer than it has in Rhode Island. But we're starting to see things that are an indication that the economy is coming back. More real estate transactions, more bank transactions, more call for things that Dan does in terms of people who are inventing things and people who are going with new product lines. So we're starting to get that kind of activity, more mergers, more acquisitions in the corporate area. So those are all indications to us that our work is increasing, but also that the economy is improving as well.
How much have you had to shift focus practices elsewhere in the firm since the recession? How much did the recession change the way your business worked, if it did at all?
It wasn't a great change. I think we were pretty lucky that we weathered the economic storm, so to speak, in a pretty even keel way or even-handed way. Our litigation practice, which is a strong part of our firm, was very strong throughout the entire economic downturn. Where we saw problems was really in the corporate area, because businesses weren't engaging in transactions, spending money, borrowing money,
their belts,
tightening their belts. That's where we sort of saw the market dip.
And I just to add to that, I think that what we do is, patent prosecutors really lends itself well to the legal market here, because we're a 50-state practice area. It's a federal practice area, so we can practice law whether it's in Rhode Island or in the Boston market or anywhere else. And what we find is clients really like the idea of paying Rhode Island legal rates, but still getting the same quality, and they're in the Boston area. So it's a good, very, very good value proposition for the Rhode Island legal market.
Getting that draftsman on the patent in Silicon Valley might be getting pricey these days,
right.
I'd imagine.
That's exactly.
Right?
You got it. That's right.
So I have to ask you guys both about law school. Everybody, a lot of people, I'm in my 30s. I have a lot of friends who are weighing that debate in the last few years. And I'll start with you, Dan, on this one. So many articles you see. Are there too many people going to law school? Is it too expensive? Is there enough demand for lawyers on the other end? I'm sure you get younger would-be lawyers talking to you, asking what they should do. What's your advice these days? What are you telling them?
Well, I love what I do, so I would advise them to go to law school. I think the big thing is you got to be very understand in advance what you're going to do when you get out of law school. And so I think finding a niche is important. Obviously, I found a niche. I kind of stumbled into it, and I think that if I had to go back and look at someone who's saying go to law school today, think thoroughly about what your exit strategy is from law school, and figuring out what particular niche you want to practice in, because that's the way you're going to rise above. There's about 1.3 million attorneys in the country right now, but there's only 26,000 active patent attorneys. So it provided me a niche that I was able to, really, find a way to find something that really I can gravitate towards.
Bob, you'd be the one those would-be lawyers be trying to get to hire them. What's your advice you're giving out these days on that question?
Well, I think there's two aspects to it. First is the cost. It's very expensive to go to law school. You're talking about 3 years, and you're probably going to spend $60,000 to $75,000 a year when you add tuition, books, and if you're going to be living away from home. So you want to make sure that this is something you've thought through, since you're going to be making a huge economic commitment. And the other thing is, as Dan said, I think you want to think through exactly what the law is and what practicing law means, because it's not quite as glamorous, I think, as folks want to make it out to be.
Not like some of the TV shows about lawyers?
Yeah, I would say that. It's a lot of time. Lawyers spend a lot of time in the office, a lot of time working. You're probably looking at, 55, 60, 65 hours at a minimum a week to be successful. And you also have to be patient, because when you come out of law school, it's going to take you a while to build a reputation, to learn your craft, and to get to know just what it entails to be a good lawyer.
Sounds like a speech you've given before once or twice in your life.
A couple of times, yeah.
I want to ask you too, you mentioned at the top, Bob, that Adler, Pollack & Sheehan has an office in Boston as well as your office in Providence.
We do.
Compare and contrast for us. What are you seeing in terms of the economy up in Boston versus what you see down here in Providence when you go back and forth?
I think the way I describe it is Boston's a little bit ahead of us, okay? So if you drive up to Boston, you see lots of cranes in the air. That's a good indication that the Boston economy is going well. Here, what we're seeing now is a lot more permitting. Permitting, zoning permits, coastal resource management, environmental permits, building permits. That's an indication that things are going to really start to move in the near future in Rhode Island. And so there's lots of projects right now on the drawing board in Rhode Island, where in Massachusetts those things have already gotten going.
Interesting. And Dan, you talk to companies that are innovating, things like that. I think you kind of said it, that you think you see the potential for growth. That's why you're doing this. That's why the practice is that, right?
That's right. And I think, to emphasize that, I'm seeing a lot of young entrepreneurs coming in with stuff. They want to start software companies. They want to start e-commerce, stores. You have mid-sized businesses that want to now start hiring again, and they want to start, innovating again. It's a huge uptick. It's a little bit lagging, maybe behind the Boston market, but I think that what we can learn from the Boston market is, as a state, we have hundreds of patents per capita, and they have thousands. And if we look at that in terms of wage growth and in terms of job creation, having patents is actually one of the best ways, because basically intangible assets are now the asset class that the new economy is going to be based on. So I think if we continue in that phase, we're going to be fine.
And we have to go to break, but Dan, I have to ask, spending all day with patents, has it made you an inventor at all? Do you tinker? Do you want to be patenting things
I
now?
never invent. No, I just never want to cross that line. So no, but I've seen a lot of great stuff, and I'm very pleasure to actually be able to.
Important thing in life: know your own limitations and your skill sets.
That's right.
I agree with that.
Right.
Bob Brooks, Dave Holman, thank you so much for being with me from Adler, Pollock & Sheehan. But don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to talk to the head of the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts about a new cultural grant program approved by voters last fall. It's rolling out, so stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and very pleased to be joined now by Randy Rosenbaum. He's the Executive Director of the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. Randy, thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Randy, first, how long have you been running the organization?
As of January, 20 years.
20 years. I thought you'd been doing this for a while, and the organization is actually heading for 50 years, right?
Yep.
The council?
Next 2017 is our 50th anniversary.
2 years away from the anniversary, and you've been there for a lot of it. So there might be people at home who don't know a thing about the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. So can you tell us, what do you do there, and where does your budget come from?
Well, we're a state agency, so I'm a state bureaucrat, and the way I describe it is that I'm sort of manage the investment strategy for the state as far as the arts are concerned. I mean, we give financial support, we provide professional development assistance to artists and arts organizations. We work in the area of arts education, but we do that with a purpose. I mean, we're using taxpayers' dollars, both state and federal money, to support the arts throughout the state and communities throughout the state. And we do that because the arts provide a great return on that investment. The easiest one to describe is the economic return on investment, because if you put money into Trinity Rep, AS 220, the Rhode Island Philharmonic, the Providence Performing Arts Center, you see a lot of activity happening in downtown Providence when all those organizations are active.
You go to the restaurant.
You have trouble getting a seat in a restaurant. You have trouble parking your car. You have to hire a babysitter. After the performance, you go out and get drinks. All that adds to the economy of the state in a significant way. A 2009 study showed that the arts accounted for about $750 million in economic activity in the state. There are other returns on investment, though, too. We support arts education in the schools. And longitudinal studies have shown that kids who are involved in the arts in schools tend to perform better, either in testing or in school itself. They tend to be more committed to education. They want to be in school. They want to be involved in school activities. Their parents are involved in significant ways. The list goes on and on. And most importantly for the economy, those kids who are involved in the arts tend to think more creatively, tend to be creative problem solvers, tend to be the sort of people that the employers of the 21st century are looking for, and they tend to command higher salaries when they do get jobs from that. And then there's the community development aspect. You see International Art Festival in Providence, which attracted tens of thousands of people.
That was a big hit. Yeah.
Huge. You see all the activity in Newport during the summer. All that stuff is great, not only for the economy, but also great for community vitality. You've got murals and you've got other kinds of public arts aspects. It's phenomenal.
Pitch you've made a few times, well rehearsed there on the importance of the arts.
I stumble through it all the time.
So quickly, because I want to have time to get to the grant program I mentioned, but a very interesting stat that your organization put out. Rhode Island is third in the nation in the number of arts-related businesses per capita, behind only California, which has Hollywood, and New York, which has Broadway.
Right.
That kind of surprised me. What counts as art-related? Why are we that high?
Well, a couple things in our favor. First of all, we have a great educational system here in Rhode Island. You've got the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the preeminent art and design schools in the country. You've got great art activity happening at Brown, at Salve, at Bryant, you name the university. They have a strong and sustainable arts program and are generating artists through those programs. Those artists are finding first of all, they fall in love with Rhode Island while they're here. Second, they're finding that it's an inexpensive place to set up shop. It's cheaper than Boston or New York, but you can tap into both of those markets by living here. And we're finding that we have an infrastructure that supports artists in the sense that they live in livable communities and they feel they can contribute to community life. So I think it's the same reason we have great restaurants. We have a great culinary school at Johnson & Wales. They graduate from the school and want to set up their own boutique restaurant.
So I wanted to have you on today to talk about that big Yes on 5 campaign. It was successful last year. $35 million for arts and culture bond that Rhode Island voters approved. There's two pieces of it. I want to start with people looking at Waterfire there, which was one of the organizations that, that was earmarked for money in the bond, right?
Yes, yeah, along with 8 other organizations that were named, from the Stadium Theater in Woonsocket down to the United Theater and the Chorus of Westerly and Westerly. You've got Waterfire, AS220, Trinity Rep, the Rhode Island Philharmonic, Second Story Theater in Warren.
What are they going to do? Is it just for operations? What are they going to do with it?
It's not for operations at all. It's for capital improvement. One of the things that came out of a discussion led by the Senate President Paiva Weed was looking at the ways the arts can contribute more dynamically to the Rhode Island economy. And we found 3 major issues, all of which have now sort of been addressed by the General Assembly in one way, shape, or form. We've got the sales tax exemption for art, which I think you want to talk a little bit about. We also have the challenging infrastructure, the buildings that art operates in. I had a discussion a while ago, actually at a House Finance Committee hearing with Jim McCarville, who's with the Rhode Island Convention Center Authority. And he said, you know, this convention center is the hardware of economic development in our state. The arts and culture are the software. They make the hardware work. Well, these buildings that Trinity Rep exists in, for example, they are pieced together and they spend thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars just to keep them, you know, working. This money helps to repair these buildings to make it so that they don't have to put the money into keeping the buildings going. They can put the money into programming that can generate more in the way of economy.
So only about a minute left. $6.5 million of that bond money is available to other organizations, unnamed ones, through a grants program. Who's eligible? What can they spend it on? How do they apply?
A nonprofit organization that either owns or leases their space, and it can be for everything from doing what I described Trinity Rep is doing, trying to keep things so that you don't have to put money into it, you can put it into programming, which is great for the economy, to making spaces more of a destination, more of the opportunity to promote these spaces as working for communities around the state. So the Contemporary Theater Company in Wakefield, for example, is looking to do some major capital projects to create a space that contributes to the Wakefield economy. And there are different organizations scattered throughout the state. The Granite Theater is interested in Westerly, for example, and other communities where this is going to contribute to the whole economic environment there.
And when are the applications due? Where do they get more information?
October 1st, you can go to the Arts Council website, just look down the menu on the left and find State Cultural Facilities Grant Program.
All right, well, you're going to be a popular man handing out money all over the state, and I'm sure people won't mind seeing you show up at their door. Thank you, Randy, for being here. Randy Rosenbaum from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. Also want to thank our guests earlier in the show from Adler, Pollock, and Sheehan. And thank you for watching and listening this week. See you next week on Executive Suite.